The gray morning light seeped through the weathered curtains of Olivia Lane's bedroom as she woke to the familiar sound of coughing from her mother's room, unaware that this day in September 1878 would be the last time she'd hear it. Telluride, Colorado was dying. Not the town itself, the silver mines had been producing well enough, but the people. They called it mountain fever, a vicious illness that had swept through the community like wildfire these past 3 weeks, leaving the living to tend to the sick until they too succumbed. As the daughter of the town's only doctor, Olivia had watched her father fight the epidemic until he'd fallen victim to it himself, leaving her to administer what little medicine remained to those still clinging to life. By the time the morning sun had fully risen over the San Juan Mountains, Olivia's mother had taken her final labored breath. The 17-year-old girl who would turn 18 in just 3 days sat motionless by her mother's bedside, her own body miraculously untouched by the sickness that had claimed nearly everyone she'd ever known. The church bells no longer tolled for the dead. There was no one left with strength enough to ring them. Olivia moved through the empty streets of Telluride like a ghost. The mining town, nestled in the valley between towering peaks, had been bustling with nearly 500 souls just a month earlier. Now, only silence greeted her as she made her way to check on the Hendersons, a family of 5 who had been fighting the fever for days. The Henderson home stood silent. All 5 beds held still forms beneath blankets. Olivia didn't need to check for pulses. The sickly sweet smell of death told her all she needed to know. She backed away, closing the door behind her. For 3 more days, Olivia continued her rounds, finding only the dead or those beyond saving. On her 18th birthday, she buried her neighbor's infant daughter in the overflowing cemetery and realized with a hollow certainty that she was completely alone. The shock of it struck her as she stood in the center of Telluride's Main Street. The mining company offices, the general store, the saloon all stood empty. Abandoned horses had broken free of their stables, wandering listlessly between buildings. A dog howled somewhere in the distance, perhaps the only other living creature in town besides herself. "Why am I still alive?" she whispered, her voice strange in the unnatural quiet. Survival instinct pushed her forward. She gathered supplies from the general store, food, clothing, anything useful, and returned to her family home. Perhaps someone would come. Perhaps others had survived in the outlying homesteads. But as days turned into a week, Olivia's hope dimmed. She found her father's journal and wrote in it each day, documenting her solitude. September 26, 1878. Still alone in Telluride. Perhaps the entire world has ended and I simply haven't been informed. Her attempt at humor fell flat as she stared at the words on the page. On the 10th day of her solitude, Olivia noticed the supplies dwindling. She would need to venture further, perhaps to neighboring mining camps, though she feared what she might find there. More death, more emptiness. That night, a storm raged through the valley, lightning splitting the sky and thunder echoing off the mountains like cannon fire. Olivia huddled in her bed, listening to the wind howl through the empty town, thinking it sounded like the voices of the dead calling to her. Morning broke clear and bright, the storm having cleansed the air. Olivia had just finished her meager breakfast when she heard the distinct sound of hoofbeats on the packed earth of the main street. Her heart leapt into her throat. She rushed to the window, hardly daring to hope. Through the glass, she saw a man on horseback, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the morning sun, a cowboy hat shading his face. For a moment, she couldn't move, paralyzed by the sight of another living human being. Then, flinging open the door, she ran into the street, waving her arms wildly. "Hello," she shouted, her voice cracking from disuse. "Hello, I'm here." The rider spotted her, visibly startling in his saddle before urging his horse forward. As he drew closer, Olivia could make out his features' strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble, intense eyes scanning the street warily, taking in the silent buildings. He pulled his horse to a stop several yards from her, caution evident in his posture. "Miss," he called, his voice deep and uncertain. Are you alone here?" Olivia nodded, tears suddenly streaming down her face. "Everyone's gone, the fever. It took everyone." The cowboy's eyes widened as he took in her words, his gaze sweeping the deserted town with new understanding. "Everyone," he echoed, disbelief coloring his tone. "I've been alone for nearly 2 weeks," Olivia said, wiping at her tears with the back of her hand. "I thought perhaps I was the only person left alive in the world." The man dismounted in one fluid motion, though he kept his distance. "Name's Lucas Winters," he said, removing his hat and holding it against his chest. "I was heading to Silverton when I heard rumors of sickness in these parts. Thought I should see if help was needed." He paused, his expression grim. "Guess I'm too late for that." "Olivia Lane," she replied, suddenly conscious of her disheveled appearance. "My father was the doctor here. He tried to save everyone. We both did." Lucas nodded slowly, his eyes softening with compassion. "And yet you're still standing. Must be made of stronger stuff than most, Miss Lane." For the first time in weeks, Olivia felt something other than despair, a tiny flicker of human connection that made her chest ache with unexpected relief. Are you afraid to come closer?" she asked, suddenly worried that he would leave her, terrified of catching whatever had decimated Telluride. Lucas studied her for a long moment. "If this fever was still catchable, you'd have it by now," he reasoned. "And I'm not one to abandon a lady in distress." He took several steps toward her, his boots stirring up dust from the empty street. "When was the last time you ate a proper meal, Miss Lane?" The question made Olivia realize just how hungry she had been for days. "I can't remember," she admitted. "Well then," Lucas said, a gentle smile touching his lips, "perhaps that's where we should start." In the kitchen of her family home, Olivia watched as Lucas unpacked supplies from his saddlebags: coffee, bacon, beans, and even a small sack of fresh apples. His presence filled the empty house, bringing life back to spaces that had been haunted by absence. "You shouldn't stay," Olivia said suddenly as he stoked the stove. "It's not safe here. What if the sickness comes back?" Lucas paused, looking at her over his shoulder. "From what I understand about these fevers, they burn hot and fast. If it was going to claim you, it would have done so already." He returned to his task, adding kindling to the stove. "Besides, I can't just ride away leaving you here alone." "Why not? You don't know me." He straightened, meeting her eyes directly. "Because that's not who I am, Miss Lane. My pa taught me better than that." As the smell of cooking food filled the kitchen, Olivia felt tears threatening again. Such a simple, normal thing, breakfast cooking on the stove, yet it seemed miraculous after her days of solitude and grief. Lucas moved with quiet efficiency, seemingly understanding her need for normalcy. He didn't press her with questions or empty sympathy. Instead, he filled the silence with small talk about his journey, the weather, anything but the devastation surrounding them. When he placed a plate of hot food before her, Olivia stared at it for a long moment before looking up at him. "Thank you," she said, the words inadequate for the gratitude she felt. "Eat," he encouraged, taking a seat across from her with his own plate. "We'll figure out the rest after." The rest, as it turned out, was more complicated than either of them anticipated. After breakfast, Lucas insisted on seeing the town for himself, assessing the situation. Olivia led him through Telluride's empty streets, pointing out the buildings and recounting who had lived or worked where: the saloon, the assay office, the general store. Each building they entered told the same story: abandoned in haste, personal belongings left behind, lives interrupted. Lucas's expression grew increasingly grim as they progressed. "How many people lived here?" he asked as they stood in the silent church. "Nearly 500, Olivia replied, her voice echoing in the empty space. "The mines were doing well. People had been coming from all over." Lucas removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair. "And you've confirmed they're all—" "Most of them," Olivia said quietly. "Some might have fled when the sickness first appeared, but not many. It happened so fast." She swallowed hard. "I've been checking the houses, finding them." Lucas's jaw tightened, and she could see him processing the magnitude of what had happened. "You've been burying them by yourself?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "The ones I could," Olivia admitted. "The men from the mine. They helped at first, digging graves, then they started falling sick too." She looked away. "Eventually, I couldn't keep up." He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, the weight of it somehow anchoring her to the present. "No one could, Miss Lane. No one could." They continued their somber tour, eventually reaching the cemetery at the edge of town. Crude wooden crosses marked fresh graves, some with names, others without. Beyond them lay rows of sheet-wrapped bodies, waiting for proper burial. Lucas stood silently, his hat in his hands, taking in the scene before him. "This can't be your burden alone anymore," he said finally. "I'll help you put them to rest." For the next 3 days, they worked side by side, digging graves and burying Telluride's dead. Lucas's strong back and capable hands made the work go faster, but the emotional toll weighed heavily on them both. Each evening, exhausted and dirt-stained, they would return to Olivia's house, sharing quiet meals and finding comfort in not being alone. On the 4th day, as they lowered the body of elderly Mrs. Peterson into the ground, Olivia finally asked the question that had been on her mind. "What will happen now? To the town, I mean." Lucas leaned on his shovel, considering her question. "Word will spread. The mining company will hear their operations gone silent. The territorial government will send someone eventually." He glanced at her. "But I don't think you should wait for that." "What do you mean? This place," he gestured around them, "it's a tomb now, Miss Lane. There's nothing left for you here but memories and ghosts." His eyes were kind but resolute. "You need to start fresh somewhere else." Olivia felt a surge of panic at the thought. "Leave? But where would I go? Everyone I know is—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "I'm heading to my brother's ranch near Durango," Lucas said. "It's a day's ride south. You'd be welcome there while you figure out your next steps." The offer hung in the air between them, weighted with implication. Olivia barely knew this man, yet in the past few days, he had become her entire world, the only living soul with whom she shared the burden of Telluride's tragedy. "I don't know," she said finally. "This is my home." Lucas nodded, not pushing further. "Think on it. There's no rush to decide today." That evening, as Lucas prepared their supper, Olivia found herself drawn to the window, looking out at the town she had known her entire life. The setting sun cast long shadows between the buildings, making Telluride appear even more desolate than it was in full daylight. "You're right," she said suddenly. "There's nothing left for me here." Lucas looked up from the stove. "You'll come to Durango then?" Olivia nodded, feeling both terrified and relieved by her decision. "If your offer still stands." "It does," he assured her. "We'll leave at first light." They spent the evening preparing for the journey, gathering supplies and packing what personal belongings Olivia couldn't bear to leave behind: her mother's silver hairbrush, her father's pocket watch and medical journals, a family Bible with generations of Lanes recorded in its pages. As Olivia folded clothing into a travel bag, she came across her father's final journal entry, written just before he fell ill. The fever shows no sign of abating. I fear for Olivia, though she remains remarkably resilient. Perhaps her youth protects her. I pray it is so. She traced her fingers over his familiar handwriting, feeling a renewed sense of loss. I need to visit them once more before we go, she told Lucas. My parents. Understanding crossed his features. Of course. We'll go first thing in the morning before we leave. Dawn broke clear and cool the next day. Lucas waited respectfully at a distance while Olivia knelt between her parents' graves, marked with crosses she had fashioned herself. I don't understand why I was spared, she whispered to them, but I promise I won't waste the life I still have. She placed wildflowers on each grave, wiping tears from her cheeks. I love you both. I hope you're together now. When she finally stood and turned away, Lucas was waiting with the horses, his sturdy buckskin gelding and a gentle bay mare he'd found in the livery stable and prepared for her journey. Ready? He asked simply. Olivia took one last look at Telluride, the town of her birth, now her family's final resting place. Yes, she said, I'm ready. They rode south, following the trail that wound through the mountains toward Durango. Lucas set an easy pace, mindful that Olivia, though competent on horseback, wasn't accustomed to long journeys. The dramatic landscape of the San Juan Mountains surrounded them, towering peaks still capped with snow even in early autumn, dense forests of pine and aspen, meadows dotted with late-blooming wildflowers. As they traveled, Lucas pointed out landmarks and shared stories of his own journeys through this territory. Bit by bit, Olivia found herself responding, asking questions, engaging with the world around her instead of dwelling on what she'd lost. How long have you been riding these trails? She asked as they paused to rest the horses by a clear mountain stream. Lucas squinted up at the sun, calculating. Going on 10 years now, I reckon. Left home at 16, worked cattle drives in Texas, did some scouting for the Army. He handed her a canteen. Spent the last few years moving between ranches, following the work. That sounds lonely, Olivia observed. A small smile touched his lips. It can be, but there's something to be said for the freedom of it. He looked at her, his expression growing more serious. Though I've been thinking lately it might be time to put down some roots. My brother James has been after me to join him at his place. And is that what you want? Lucas considered the question. I think maybe it is, he said finally. A man can only drift for so long before he starts wanting something more permanent. As they continued their journey, Olivia found herself studying Lucas when he wasn't looking, the confident way he sat his horse, the quiet strength in his hands, the occasional smile that transformed his serious expression. He was older than her, perhaps 26 or 27, with the weathered look of someone who'd lived much of his life outdoors. They made camp that evening in a sheltered grove of aspens, their golden leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. Lucas efficiently built a fire and prepared a simple meal while Olivia tended to the horses, grateful for tasks that kept her hands and mind occupied. As they sat by the fire after eating, Olivia found herself speaking of Telluride, of her childhood there, of her father's work as a doctor and her mother's talent for music. The memories flowed freely, no longer weighted with quite as much pain. Pa wanted me to marry the banker's son, she said with a soft laugh. Edmund Thornton. He was nice enough, I suppose, but so concerned with propriety, always worried about his suits getting dusty. Lucas smiled. Not the adventurous type, then. Not at all. Olivia gazed into the flames. I always thought I'd have more time to figure it all out, who I wanted to be, what I wanted from life. And now, she trailed off, the enormity of her changed circumstances washing over her again. Now you have a different kind of time, Lucas said quietly. A fresh start. That's something many folks never get. Olivia looked at him across the fire, his features illuminated by the dancing flames. I suppose you're right, though I never imagined starting over quite like this. Few of us get to choose how our paths change, Miss Lane, only how we walk them afterward. The wisdom in his words settled over her like a comforting blanket. They talked long into the night, sharing stories and thoughts, finding connection in the vast wilderness. When Olivia finally retired to her bedroll, she realized with surprise that she had gone hours without thinking of death or loss. Lucas had given her that gift without even trying. They reached the outskirts of Durango the following afternoon. After the ghost town of Telluride, the sight of people going about their business, shopkeepers sweeping doorways, children playing, wagons moving along the streets seemed almost overwhelming to Olivia. It's so alive, she whispered, unconsciously moving her horse closer to Lucas's as they rode down the main street. He nodded, understanding her reaction. James's place is about 5 miles outside town. We'll head there directly, give you a chance to adjust before facing too many folks at once. Relief washed over her. Thank you. I think that would be best. The Winters Ranch sprawled across a picturesque valley, with the Animas River cutting through rich pastureland. A substantial log home stood at its center, smoke curling from the chimney, with several outbuildings and corrals nearby. As they approached, a tall man emerged from the barn, shading his eyes against the sun. "Lucas," he called, striding toward them. The family resemblance was unmistakable, though James Winters was broader through the shoulders, his hair a shade lighter than his brother's. Lucas dismounted, grinning as he clasped his brother's hand. "James, place is looking good." "Better now you've finally decided to visit," James replied before his gaze shifted to Olivia. "And you've brought company." Lucas's expression sobered as he helped Olivia down from her horse. "James, this is Miss Olivia Lane. She's had a difficult time." Briefly, he explained the situation in Telluride, keeping his voice low though there was no one else nearby to overhear. James's face registered shock, then deep sympathy as he turned to Olivia. "Miss Lane, you're most welcome here. Any friend of Lucas's is family to us." "Thank you, Mr. Winters," Olivia said, suddenly feeling the fatigue of the journey, both physical and emotional, catching up with her. "It's James, please," he insisted. "Come inside. Rebecca will be glad for another woman's company." Rebecca Winters proved to be a warm, practical woman with a ready smile and a no-nonsense manner that immediately set Olivia at ease. Upon hearing a simplified version of Olivia's circumstances, she whisked her away to a guest room, provided fresh water for washing, and promised a hot meal would be waiting when she was ready. Left alone for the first time since Lucas had ridden into Telluride, Olivia sat on the edge of the comfortable bed, running her fingers over the handmade quilt. The normality of the room, the curtains at the window, the pitcher and basin on the washstand, the small vase of wildflowers on the dresser seemed almost surreal after what she'd experienced. She washed her face and hands, changed into a clean dress from her meager belongings, and tried to tame her hair into some semblance of order. Looking in the small mirror, she hardly recognized herself. Her face was thinner, her eyes holding a depth of experience that hadn't been there a month ago. "You're still here," she told her reflection. "You survived." Dinner at the Winters home was a revelation. The table was abundant with food: roast chicken, vegetables from the kitchen garden, fresh bread still warm from the oven. Rebecca's 7-year-old daughter, Emma, chattered happily throughout the meal, while her 10-year-old brother, Thomas, regarded Olivia with shy curiosity. The conversation flowed naturally, with James and Rebecca asking questions about Olivia's life before the epidemic, carefully avoiding the painful recent past. Lucas was quieter than she'd come to expect, watching her with a gentle attentiveness that made her cheeks warm whenever their eyes met. After dinner, when the children had been sent to bed, James produced a bottle of whiskey and poured small measures for the adults. "To new beginnings," he toasted, raising his glass to Olivia. She took a tentative sip, the liquor burning a warm path down her throat. "Thank you," she said, looking around at their kind faces, "for welcoming me into your home. I don't know how to repay such kindness." "There's nothing to repay," Rebecca assured her. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need to find your footing." Later, as Olivia prepared for bed in the guest room, a soft knock sounded at her door. She opened it to find Lucas standing in the hallway, his expression uncertain. "I wanted to make sure you're settling in all right," he said, keeping his voice low to avoid disturbing the sleeping household. "Everyone has been very kind," Olivia replied. "Your family is wonderful." Lucas nodded, seeming pleased. "They are good people." He hesitated, then added, "I'll be heading into Durango tomorrow to notify the territorial authorities about Telluride. They'll need to send someone official to document what happened." The reminder of Telluride sent a pang through Olivia's heart, but it wasn't as sharp as before. "Should I come with you to tell them what I know?" "Only if you feel up to it," Lucas said. "It might be difficult, having to recount everything." Olivia considered this. "I think I should. I owe it to them, to everyone who died, to make sure their stories are told properly." Pride flickered in Lucas's eyes. "You're a brave woman, Olivia Lane." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice made something flutter in her chest. "Not brave," she demurred, "just doing what needs to be done." "That's what bravery is," he countered softly. He seemed about to say more, then thought better of it. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." As he turned to go, Olivia called after him. "Lucas," he paused, looking back at her. "Yes, thank you for finding me, for everything." A smile touched his lips. "Good night, Olivia." "Good night, Lucas." The following day brought the difficult task of officially reporting the Telluride tragedy. The territorial administrator in Durango was appropriately shocked by their account, asking detailed questions and taking copious notes. A telegraph was sent to Denver, and plans were made to dispatch officials to verify the situation and secure the town's remaining assets. Olivia answered questions for hours, her throat growing dry and her heart heavy as she recounted the progression of the epidemic, naming as many of the dead as she could remember. Lucas remained by her side throughout, a steadying presence when the memories threatened to overwhelm her. "You've been through an ordeal few could imagine, Miss Lane," the administrator said as their interview concluded. "The territory is grateful for your detailed account. It will help prevent similar tragedies in the future." On their ride back to the ranch, Olivia was subdued, the day's conversations having stirred up memories she'd been trying to set aside. "You did well today," Lucas told her as their horses walked side by side along the trail. "It couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," she admitted. "But it feels right that someone knows what happened there, that they didn't just disappear without anyone noticing." Lucas nodded. "The officials will sort out any legal matters, property, inheritances, that sort of thing. They'll try to contact next of kin for those who had family elsewhere." "And me? What happens to me now?" The question hung between them, laden with possibilities neither had yet voiced. "That depends on what you want," Lucas said carefully. "You're entitled to your parents' property, of course. You could sell it, use the money to start fresh somewhere." "I don't think I could go back there to live," Olivia said quietly. "Not after everything." No one would expect you to. Lucas glanced at her. Do you have any other family? Anyone you could go to? Olivia shook her head. My mother had a sister in St. Louis, but they lost touch years ago. I wouldn't even know how to find her. She straightened in the saddle, a new resolve settling over her. I need to make my own way now. Over the next few weeks, Olivia gradually integrated into life at the Winters Ranch. Rebecca welcomed her help with household tasks and caring for the children, while James discovered she had a knack with the horses, particularly a skittish mare that had resisted training. Lucas, true to his word to his brother, began settling into ranch life, helping with the cattle and repairs to the buildings. Olivia often found herself working alongside him, their easy companionship deepening with each passing day. October gave way to November, bringing cooler temperatures and preparations for winter. News arrived from Durango that territorial officials had completed their assessment of Telluride, confirming Olivia's account of the epidemic. A letter informed her that her parents' property had been officially registered in her name, and offers had been made by the mining company to purchase several parcels of land, including the Lane home. It's a fair price, Lucas said as they sat on the porch one evening, reviewing the documents. More than fair, actually. They're probably feeling guilty about abandoning the town when the sickness hit. Olivia nodded, tracing her finger over the official seal on the paper. It feels strange, selling everything, like I'm erasing what was there. You're not erasing anything, Lucas assured her. The memories, the good ones, those stay with you. The rest, well, sometimes it's better to let go of the physical reminders. She glanced at him, wondering not for the first time what losses in his own past had taught him such wisdom. I'll sign the papers, she decided. Use the money to build something new. The question of what that something new might be remained unspoken between them, though Olivia had begun to recognize the way Lucas watched her when he thought she wasn't looking, with a mixture of admiration and something deeper that made her heart race. For his part, Lucas had grown increasingly protective of Olivia, seeking out her company whenever his work allowed, finding small ways to ease her adjustment to her new life. He taught her to shoot his revolver, insisting that every woman on the frontier should know how to defend herself. He brought her books from Durango, remembering her mention of enjoying poetry. He carved a small wooden horse for her, noting how she'd bonded with the bay mare they'd brought from Telluride. These gestures weren't lost on James and Rebecca, who exchanged knowing glances whenever the two were together. My brothers never stayed in one place this long, James commented to Olivia one morning as they worked together in the vegetable garden. Not since he left home at 16. Olivia felt her cheeks warm. He said he was considering settling down here even before we met. James smiled knowingly. He may have been considering it, but I reckon there's a stronger reason keeping him here now. Before Olivia could respond, they were interrupted by the sound of horses approaching. Lucas and Thomas returning from checking fence lines in the north pasture. Riders coming, Thomas called excitedly, jumping down from his pony. Pa, there's men coming from town. James straightened, shading his eyes to see the approaching group. 3 riders, moving at a steady pace toward the ranch house. Lucas dismounted, his expression guarded as he moved to stand near Olivia. Territorial Marshal, he said quietly, recognizing the lead rider. And those look like mining company men with him. Olivia felt a flutter of anxiety. Had something gone wrong with the Telluride paperwork? Were there questions about her account of the epidemic? The riders pulled up in the yard, the marshal touching the brim of his hat in greeting. Mr. Winters, he said to James, apologies for arriving unannounced. We're looking for Miss Olivia Lane. I'm Olivia Lane, she said, stepping forward, conscious of Lucas moving protectively closer to her side. The marshal's weathered face softened slightly. Miss Lane, I'm Marshal Edwards. These gentlemen represent the Silver Peak Mining Company. He nodded to his companions. We've come about the situation in Telluride. James invited the men inside, where Rebecca quickly provided coffee. Around the kitchen table, the marshal explained the purpose of their visit. The company has completed its inventory of the Telluride operation, he said. Beyond the offer for your family property, Miss Lane, there's the matter of your father's medical practice. One of the mining company representatives, a Mr. Harrington, cleared his throat. Doctor Lane was employed by our company to provide care for our miners and their families. He was well respected and, by all accounts, remained at his post treating the sick until he himself succumbed. Olivia nodded, her throat tight with emotion. He did. The company feels a special obligation in this case, Harrington continued. We've established a fund in Dr. Lane's name, a settlement for his surviving family member. For you, Miss Lane. He slid a document across the table, along with a bank draft that made Olivia's eyes widen in surprise. This is very generous, she managed, stunned by the amount. It's deserved, Marshal Edwards said firmly. Your father was a hero, staying to help when others fled, and you yourself showed remarkable courage. The conversation continued, with the officials explaining that the mining company planned to eventually reopen operations in Telluride, though likely not for at least a year, to allow any lingering contagion to dissipate. They asked Olivia if she had any personal items still in the town she wished retrieved, offering to send men to collect them under her direction. By the time the visitors departed, the afternoon was waning, and Olivia found herself sitting alone on the porch, trying to process this unexpected development. The settlement would provide her with financial independence enough to start over anywhere she chose. Lucas found her there as dusk began to fall, settling onto the step beside her. That's quite a change in your circumstances, he observed, nodding toward the papers in her lap. Yes, Olivia agreed. I never expected anything like this. You deserve it. Lucas was quiet for a moment before asking, Have you thought about what you'll do now? Where you'll go? The question carried weight, both of them aware that her financial situation meant she no longer needed to rely on the winter's hospitality. Olivia turned to look at him directly. Do you want me to go, Lucas? Surprise flashed across his features. No, he said quickly. God, no, that's not what I meant at all. Then what did you mean? Lucas ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking less sure of himself than she'd ever seen him. I meant that you have choices now. Options. You could go anywhere, do anything. And if I wanted to stay? Olivia asked softly. Here, I mean, in Durango. Hope flickered in Lucas's eyes. Then I'd be very glad of it. They sat in companionable silence as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Finally, Lucas spoke again, his voice low and earnest. When I found you in Telluride, you were the strongest person I'd ever met, standing alone in a town of the dead, somehow finding the courage to keep going. He turned toward her. I admired that strength then. I admire it still. But it's more than admiration I feel for you now, Olivia. Her heart pounded as she met his gaze. What is it then? Instead of answering with words, Lucas reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, and brushed his fingers against her cheek. When she leaned into his touch, he moved closer, his eyes asking permission before he gently pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was tender, hesitant at first, then deepening as Olivia responded, her hands coming up to rest against his chest. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing unevenly. I've wanted to do that for weeks, Lucas admitted, his voice rough with emotion. Olivia smiled, feeling truly alive for the first time since the epidemic had stolen her world. "I've wanted you to." Their courtship progressed with the blessing of James and Rebecca, who had come to care for Olivia as family. As winter settled over the Animas Valley, bringing snow and long evenings by the fire, Lucas and Olivia's bond deepened. They shared stories of their pasts, dreams for their futures, and gradually the shadow of Telluride receded from Olivia's heart, replaced by new hopes and possibilities. In early December, with Christmas approaching, Olivia used part of her settlement to purchase a small property just outside Durango, a modest house with enough land for a garden and a few horses. Lucas helped her make repairs and improvements, though neither explicitly spoke of him living there with her. That changed on Christmas Eve, as they walked together from town after attending services at the small church. Snow was falling gently, dusting Lucas's shoulders and catching in Olivia's hair as they made their way along the moonlit road. "I have something for you," Lucas said, stopping beneath a snow-laden pine tree. He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small package wrapped in brown paper. Olivia unwrapped it carefully to reveal a carved wooden box, its lid inlaid with a delicate pattern of mountain flowers. "It's beautiful," she breathed, running her fingers over the smooth surface. "Open it," Lucas urged softly. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, lay a simple gold ring with a small pearl at its center. "It was my mother's," Lucas explained, his voice catching slightly. "She gave it to me before she died, said I should give it to the woman I couldn't imagine living without." He took Olivia's hands in his. "I never understood what she meant until I met you." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes as Lucas dropped to one knee in the snow before her. "Olivia Lane, I know we've known each other only a short time, but in that time, you've become everything to me. I love your strength, your kindness, your determination to find joy even after unimaginable loss." He paused, his eyes shining with emotion in the moonlight. "I want to build a life with you, a good life, filled with love and family and all the happiness you deserve. Will you marry me?" Through her tears, Olivia smiled down at the man who had found her when she was lost in more ways than one. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you, Lucas Winters." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to pull her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that warmed them both despite the winter chill. They were married on New Year's Day, 1879, in the Durango church, with James and Rebecca standing as witnesses and the children serving as attendants. Olivia wore a dress of deep blue velvet, purchased with her settlement money, and carried a bouquet of winter greenery and dried flowers. Lucas, usually most comfortable in his trail-worn clothing, cut a handsome figure in a new suit, his dark hair tamed for the occasion. "I never thought I'd find happiness again," Olivia told him as they shared their first dance as husband and wife at the small reception at James and Rebecca's home. "After Telluride, I thought that part of my life was over." Lucas held her close, his hand warm against the small of her back. "Life continues, even after the darkest times," he said. "Sometimes we just need someone to remind us of that." "You did more than remind me," Olivia said softly. "You showed me." Their new life together began in the small house Olivia had purchased, which quickly became a home under their combined efforts. Lucas proved to be a skilled rancher, gradually building up a small herd of cattle with James's guidance. Olivia, drawing on her experience as a doctor's daughter, began assisting Durango's overworked physician, finding purpose in helping others just as her father had done. Spring brought new growth to the land and news that expanded their happiness. Olivia was expecting a child. "Are you pleased?" she asked Lucas as they lay in bed one night, his hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. "Please doesn't begin to describe it," he answered, his voice thick with emotion. "I never thought I'd have this, a wife, a child on the way, a place that feels like home." Olivia covered his hand with hers. "Nor did I after everything that happened. But you were right, Lucas. Life does continue." As her pregnancy progressed, Olivia found herself thinking more often of her parents, wishing they could know their grandchild. One evening, as she and Lucas sat on their porch watching the sunset, she shared these thoughts with him. "They would have loved you," she said. "Both of you." She placed a hand on her growing belly where their child had just kicked. Lucas wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "We'll make sure our child knows them through your stories, your memories. They'll live on that way." In late November 1879, just as the first snow of winter began to fall, Olivia gave birth to a son they named William Thomas Winters, William for her father, Thomas for Lucas's father. The birth was difficult but ultimately successful, with Durango's doctor commenting on Olivia's remarkable strength. "Just like his mother," Lucas said proudly as he held his son for the first time, the tiny boy's fingers curling around his thumb. "Strong from the very beginning." As William grew, so did their ranch and their happiness. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Eleanor Rebecca Winters, completing their family. The children thrived in the clean mountain air, growing strong and healthy under their parents' watchful eyes. Occasionally, travelers passing through would bring news of Telluride. The mining company had indeed reopened operations, and the town was slowly coming back to life, though with a new population. Olivia listened to these accounts with interest, but no desire to return. Her life was firmly rooted in Durango now, with Lucas and their children. On William's 5th birthday, a package arrived from Denver, a letter from the territorial governor commending Dr. William Lane posthumously for his service during the Telluride epidemic, along with a bound copy of the official history of the event, in which Olivia's role was prominently mentioned. That night, after the children were asleep, Lucas found Olivia on the porch, reading the history by lamplight. "Are you all right?" he asked, settling beside her. She nodded, closing the book. "It feels like reading about someone else's life now, a different Olivia." "You've come a long way from that girl I found standing alone in an empty town," Lucas acknowledged, taking her hand. "I have," she agreed. "But I wouldn't be here without you, Lucas. You didn't just save me from being alone. You showed me that happiness was still possible, that my heart could heal and love again." Lucas lifted her hand to his lips. "We saved each other, I think. I was drifting before I met you, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. You gave me a reason to stop running." As they sat together in the quiet of the evening, their children sleeping peacefully inside, their ranch stretching out before them in the moonlight, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought her here from unimaginable loss to abundant joy. The epidemic that had devastated Telluride would always be part of her story, but it was no longer the defining chapter. Instead, it was the moment that had set her on the path to Lucas, to their children, to the life they had built together. From that darkest of times had come her greatest happiness. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked, noticing her contemplative expression. Olivia smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I'm thinking about how life continues, even when we think it can't possibly go on. How love finds us, even in the most unlikely places." She turned to meet his gaze. "And how grateful I am that you rode into Telluride that day." Lucas drew her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "So am I, my love, so am I." In the years that followed, their ranch prospered, their children grew tall and strong, and their love deepened with each passing season. The tragic events of Telluride gradually became a distant memory, overshadowed by the fullness of the life they had created together. And when their grandchildren gathered around the fireplace on winter evenings, begging for stories, Olivia would sometimes tell them about a brave cowboy who had ridden into a ghost town and found a lone survivor, a story that never failed to end happily, just as their own lives had. For Lucas and Olivia Winters, the epidemic that had once seemed like the end of everything had proven to be merely a beginning, the first chapter in a love story that would span decades, enriched by the knowledge that they had found each other when both needed it most, and had shown each other that even after the darkest night, dawn would come again.